Today we look at the letter of James, verses 2 through 8. Beautiful words, important words for living a life that is centered on the reality of God. In simple words, he gives us profound instruction. But once again, it is instruction that can be misunderstood and misrepresented. And so we study it in reference to the rest of his letter, which balances out some of the things found in these verses. We begin with the reading. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of any kind. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. This first idea of the testing of your faith can easily be misrepresented as God testing us. And so we look at verse 13 and we find, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. I've mentioned before that the Lord's Prayer contains a passage that is confusing, that is poorly translated, lead us not into temptation, as though God would lead us into temptation. In the French version, we read, Ne nous laisse pas entrer dans la tentation. Do not let us enter into temptation, which is the translation that Pope Francis is highlighting. So free us, keep us from. Do not let us be impacted by temptation. So going back to the letter of James, this idea of tests leading to perseverance can be understood not as God causing them, but as the very essence of life, in which such tests occur almost daily. And this perseverance, this focus, is the crucial factor mentioned by Jesus so many times. Knocking at the door until it is opened, calling upon the judge until he responds. This commitment of our will and of our attention and energy for these higher things has the element of unifying us around this core effort of our lives. This is where perseverance becomes the fuel for evolution, for awakening. This in contrast to what James speaks of later about the double-minded man, a very, very important, timeless psychological perception. Double-minded, like the wave of the sea, inconsistent. You never know what is coming next in your character and your opinions and your direction, because we are not unified. So here we have both a revelation of our condition, being a multiplicity, one thought taking over after another, never certain who's in charge. This is behind that statement of the double-minded person. James goes on to say, that man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. Imagine that. What a powerful statement. Nothing, if we are so fragmented, which is our natural condition, even if we are not aware of it, because then there is no good soil to receive. There is no developed center of our being that is completely dedicated to these higher things, to the sacred, to the spiritual path, and therefore no channel through which grace can enter and connect with us. Certainly there can be moments when, despite everything, we have this connection for a moment. But even such a great experience can be lost because there is nothing solid, no rock to stand on within ourselves. This is the double-minded person. James tells us when he asks, he must believe and not doubt. Understand that he must believe doesn't mean he must be a fervent religious person with the right dogma. Behind that idea is this unification, this perseverance, this focus, to be perfectly focused. Another Greek word used by Jesus in several scriptures. Perfectly focused, so that we can have this connection. We participate in the creation of this connection. So this overcoming of difficulties, this using the fuel of life and its friction to develop within, to develop this perseverance, leads us into maturity and completeness, as James says, not lacking anything. So then life becomes the context in which our spiritual growth occurs. Not going off to a monastery, not putting religion in a box as one little part of our life, but all of life, creatively faced, creatively responded to with consciousness of what we're doing and what our choices are. This develops the maturity of being, which is at the heart of this journey. This maturity in Christ, spoken of again and again, St. Paul making it a central theme, because we are on a path, this path of theosis, of God realization. This is our purpose for being, and the keys here are given to us. Not to live as we always live, from one thought to another, often it's opposite, uncertain as to what we want, what we must do, but finding that straight and narrow path toward the heart of God. Finally, at the end of this section, in verse 18, we find these words, He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruit of all He created. What a glorious expression of our true purpose in this world, so masked behind the ignorance and violence and insanity of humanity. The headline news, all the things that occupy us, that keep us buried beneath the culture's idea of reality. We are called to be first fruits, created and recreated in this life, to consciously walk in the presence of God. And this, of course, makes us in the world but not of it. How could it be otherwise? Through perseverance, through unification around this certainty of God's presence. This is a roadmap for us to true spiritual awakening.